before you think I'm a wee bit touched, I mean, I'm standing out here in a beautiful, albeit cold, Canadian winter day with a canoe. So I've either got a really long portage south to find open water, or a real long wait for this lake that's in front of me to thaw. The purpose of this, we're entitling this episode "The Evolution of the Canoe." And a few weeks ago, I had the privilege and opportunity to meet a fellow by the name of Ray Kettlewell. Now, in his 91st year, Ray is still building cedar canvas canoes. And he agreed to allow Cathy and I to go up to his shop and interview him about how that style and method and material of canoes fits into the evolution of the canoe. So Cathy and I are going to be packing up our gear and heading up into Canadian Shield country and spending a day with a extremely interesting man. In his 91st year, boy, he had more stories than I could sit and talk to him all day. Anyway, I can't do an episode without a wee bit of history. So the canoe itself is actually about 8,000 years old. And we know that because they date back to the Netherlands area, and from China to Nigeria we find dugout canoes. So canoes that were dug out from a solid log. Now when I do demonstrations or education days, I frequently get asked, well, how old is the birchbark canoe? So what we know is that we see a transition from tools that were designed for digging out logs for this type of craft to tools that were specifically designed for birchbark canoe building. So we see things like the crooked knife, what Europeans call it, the Ojibwe called it the mogatogan. We see stone tools designed for splitting the cedar ribs and material required for it. And when they carbon date those sites, they date back between 2,800 and 3,300 years ago. So let's saw it off at about approximately 3,000 years old. And it stays the canoe of choice for, or the material of choice for centuries, until we get to what Ray is going to demonstrate for us. It's interesting, and sadly, the canoe is literally what allowed Europeans to conquer or colonize the New World. Without this iconic craft, that simply wouldn't have happened, much to the detriment of the indigenous peoples and their culture. So, like I say, it can't be argued that it certainly helped Europeans colonize, but there were also numerous examples of where it slowed down that colonization. And a classic one would be the Wabanaki in what we think of as Maine today. So most of the American colony, the population was in the lower New England parts of the colonies, and they didn't have birch trees. So they didn't have birch bark canoes. Now the Wabanaki were able to build these crafts. They weigh 50, 60, 70 pounds. But the colonists were using wooden plank boats built with nails, and they would weigh, even the smaller ones would weigh in the neighborhood of 400 pounds. The Wabanaki were able to sort of attack and then retreat, and there's no way they could portage those heavy boats from one river system or lake system to the next. We can carry that forward right into the American Revolution, and we'll look at Benedict Arnold before he becomes the infamous traitor. And he's on a mission to take Quebec from the British. And he starts with about 1,000 men, and he's going to make his way up what was called the Wabanaki portage system into the St. Lawrence River and take Quebec, Fortress Quebec. That doesn't go so well for him. He starts off with over 1,000 men, and it's so arduous, them trying to move these canoes over these European wooden boats over these portages, that he loses hundreds of men to death and hundreds of men to desertion. And it is a failed mission. Anyway, I'm going to go up, and before we fill in the middle part of the evolution of canoes, I'm going to go and show you a couple of modern canoes that Cathy and I use. We have a fleet of canoes, from birchbark to Kevlar to what I'll show you up there. And then when we visit Ray, he's going to fill in the blanks in the middle. Okay, if we fast forward past the the late 1800s and 1900s. I should point out too that at that time we see once they become there's a transition from a workhorse to a transition into recreational use, and to fill the demand that's growing for this new sport, if you would. We have a number of companies like Old Town Canoe Company in Maine. We've got the famous Peterborough Company, the famous Chestnut Company. And while I'm on Chestnut, when we visit Ray, he's going to be using a form that's an old Chestnut factory form. It was built in 1907. So he's making canoes, literally. He's making canoes on a bit of history. It's about 100 and close to 120 years old, I guess. So, and then we get to modern canoes. So this is Cathy's solo canoe. It's 16 and a half feet long. It's only about 27 inches at the beam in the center thwart. It has carbon fiber sides, and it has a gelled Kevlar bottom, and at 16 and a half feet it comes in at under 30 pounds. So that shows you where we've gone with materials. The lower canoe is our expedition canoe, and it's literally gone thousands and thousands of miles, kilometers, whatever you want to call it, and it's been down the Yukon River twice. It's gone from Great Slave Lake to the Arctic Ocean and the Mackenzie River. It's 17 feet long. Both these canoes are asymmetrical, which is another change in the design that I'm sure Ray might get into. But the old style canoes, if you folded them in half, they'd be carbon copies. But now they have a longer bow. In other words, the widest part is behind the center of the canoe with a narrower, sharper point at the rear. Helps them track better and stuff like that. This one has a much wider beam and displaces more water, so it can carry more cargo. And I'm sure Ray's going to get into that and what those old canoe designs had in common with the ability to be a workhorse. They were still being used up to and after World War II by surveyors, trappers, prospectors, and anyway, let's get ready, get packed up, and let's let Ray fill in all those blanks between the dugout canoe of 16,000 years ago and the carbon fiber canoes of the 21st century.
Top of the morning. Here we go. Got the three iconic canoe builders here. Okay, two apprentices, right? And one iconic canoe builder. Ray Kettlewell, I introduced Ray, and Brad Archer and Kim Switzer. So these are your apprentices, right, Ray?
Well, we worked together for nearly 2 years getting it right.
Are they quick learners?
No. I don't believe in making quick learners.
No, you've got to learn it right, eh?
Yes.
Anyway, here we are at Ray's shop, and boy, this is going to be a real treat for me. We're going to delve into the transition between birchbark canoes and some of the modern materials we use today. And you're going to give us a little tour of the shop, Ray?
I can do that.
Where the heck do we start?
Well, let's start with the molds.
Okay, sounds good.
The mold sitting there is mine, and it was made in 1893. And in 1907, Chestnut bought that one and a 16 and put it into their line as the Pal and the Chum.
Okay.
Now, I bought that about 20 odd years ago and didn't really start building on it until after I sold the paddle business. So that is 132 years old.
Isn't that crazy?
And
wow.
It took a bit of doing because I had it for about 8 years. And in them, it was wet from being used, and it went a little wonky.
You had to get it all
I
straightened
had
out
to
there.
straighten it back up.
There you go.
But it's a true classic.
It's a piece of Canadian history is what it is.
It is, yes.
So this area, Ray, is just delving into the history a little bit about Peterborough area, or this general area, Lakefield. They were sort of the epicenter of canoe building, were they not?
Well, Peterborough particularly, because Peterborough, Lakefield are right shoulder on shoulder. Mm-hmm. And there were several canoe companies in there. Some of them didn't last long. Others, like Peterborough, lasted the longest, and Lakefield lasted pretty good into the thing. But at one point, there was an agreement between Chestnut in New Brunswick and Peterborough that if somebody on the East Coast wanted a Peterborough canoe, they put a Peterborough label on a Chestnut. There you go. And it worked the other way around. Somebody
Pretty
down
much
here
carbon
wanted
copies.
Well, there was a rumor around that they weren't sure who owned which.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I
it
can
was,
see that.
they just had a working agreement.
All right.
And oddly enough, there's still a tariff by railway that you can ship a canoe anywhere in Canada for $125.
There you go.
And that was put in way back when trains carried most of the freight.
Yeah, I've loaded a canoe on a train a couple of times myself. So what about this form? What do we have here?
This form is one of the originals for Beaver Canoe.
Okay.
And Omer Stringer started that company back in the late 70s. And he built this mold and a 16. And these molds wound up at Camp Tamaqua, stuffed under a cabin, and they sat there for over 20 years.
And you recovered them.
Well, I recovered this one, dried it out, and then they brought it down here, and I have reworked it and made it into a usable form.
And the canoe we see over here, Ray,
Came off this form.
Off this form.
Now, we take them off early, and we can do the finishing from here up easier on a sling form, because you can tip the canoe up sideways. Just roll it over there, Kim. You can tip it up and just work on any part you like and slide it around.
So you're not bent over.
You're not bent over.
Finishing it.
If you tried to finish it on the mold, you'd be working on your hands and knees.
And they're all butt jointed, right? When you're doing, is that what we're going to call
Well,
this?
when you're patching, yes, you butt joint that same way.
Right. How many tacks in a 16-foot canoe, Ray?
In mine, about a pound. In a beaver, it takes nearly a pound and a half because it's a much deeper canoe. Canoe here came off the form, and a guy from Camp Tamaqua was here learning to build.
Okay.
And this is his first attempt at building. Now, there's an odd mistake I let him get away with. But I told him we're going to do another one and no more mistakes. Those planks are intended to be used for planking material for the canoe. They're 3 inches thick. I plane them both sides, which gives you a perfect edge. Then they're ripped off and planed to thickness.
You know, as a Birchbark canoe builder, Ray, I would look far and wide to find feet that clear. And unlike your method in Birchbark canoe building, it all has to be done by hand.
By crooked
knife or draw knife. And, you know, I'm splitting out the sheeting that runs longitudinally.
Yep.
But I never have that clear cedar to start with.
Okay, in that book by Adney, it shows you different splitting programs for cedar and spruce.
So we have some, I'm thinking hiding in that shed over in the corner here, we got some canoes.
That's right, we do.
Look at a finished one.
Yes.
All right, let's have a
You
look.
want to have a
I
quick
do.
run through that one? We'll do it. I've known a lot of canoe builders here in Ontario, and this was built by Pam Wedd. Her canoe company was Bear Mountain Canoes over near Perry Sound, and she, very obvious how good she has had it. So we'll turn it over and you can get a look inside.
I don't know, Ray, if I call this a canoe or a work of art.
It is both.
Both. A functional canoe and a work of art.
Yeah, Pam was a very good builder. In fact, the person that taught Pam now lives and works just north of Bancroft. Name is Will Rutch. And I would predict that Will is the best builder in North America.
So
And he and Pam worked together, and this is the result of Pam's work.
beautiful. So, and how old did you say this canoe
This
is
canoe
now?
will be 22 years this spring.
So what else do we have in here, Ray? Well, we're looking
Okay.
about, we've got,
The canoe up top here was made by May Minto in Minden, and she was a very good canoe builder. And that's one of the last canoes she built. Now, I put the canvas on it, but she built the
canoe.
canoe. Yeah, every canoe that May built, all the planking were 5 inches wide.
Oh, really interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, look at that. Quite
Yeah.
a bit wider.
And she was a very good builder. She didn't try to put the same finish on as what we have on this one, but she built a very, very serviceable canoe.
Right. And what mold do we have here between here? Whose
Okay, this
mold is
canoe came off the Beaver canoe mold. I have it in here to be recanvassed and repaired. And the one below it came off my form. And I modified my form so I can make 2 different depths.
Okay.
The one up here is the first deep canoe that I built.
And what is the center depth of that? The
It's
center
about
for-
12 and a half. Without the deeper canoe, it was just about 11 and a half inches deep.
So about an inch deeper
Yeah.
in the body.
So,
Carry a little more weight in your modified one.
yes,
A little more freeboard.
more freeboard, and oddly enough, the canoe that Kim and Brad built is probably the best solo canoe that ever came off that mold.
There you go.
I'm not
Kudos
sure
to
she
you,
fully
Kim.
appreciates that.
Slight smile.
Yeah,
But we've also learned, and the biggest, I think, lesson I've learned in canoe building is recovery. That's one, and Ray will attest to that one. And canvas, what? Hides a multitude of sins.
Yeah.
So we've learned that too.
Sign of a good carpenter is the one who can hide his mistakes.
Yes,
Yeah.
Same with boat building.
yeah.
There you
exactly.
go.
Okay, when you're hand weaving, most people leave the holes exposed where the cane
Lacing
goes through.
Yeah.
And what Pam has done here is added a piece on top and tied it through so you don't see any of the holes. It's just a cap over the holes. You see a little bit of
Yeah.
a hole here and on the corner.
And then the actual lacing comes over that cap, and it's part of the actual lacing
Yes,
of
and
the seat
it ties
itself.
it through so you can't see all the holes.
But like I said, work of art. Work
It
of art.
is. Seam it, and the ends stick down in the pocket here, and then as you bend it, cross piece goes in, and you drive a
Drive in
wedge
your
in
wedges
behind
in.
it to tighten it down. And the same thing as you go all the way down. And I make them wide enough that you can bend 2 at a time.
So I'm curious about some of your tools. The bandsaw.
Bandsaw
What
was
vintage is that?
1903, and that was built in Berlin, Ontario.
We have, most people don't know this. We have a clock that was built in Berlin, Ontario.
Yep.
So after World War I, they weren't going to have any part of having a city named Berlin.
Well, they changed the name just about the time the war started.
Yeah.
But they changed it from Berlin to Kitchener.
Yep. Yeah, we have an old pendulum clock. I think it came out of a railroad station.
Yes,
It's got the stamp on the inside, Berlin, Ontario.
yes, and those clocks were very accurate.
So again, what year did you say the bandsaw is?
1903,
And what year were you born?
1934.
1934. There you go.
Now the wheels on that are 36-inch diameter, and the band length is 19'6". The ribs here are for the Beaver canoe, and this is rib stock that can be trimmed to size or length
Mm-hmm.
to make them up. But the ribs standing up in the rack are for my form.
Boy, I build my next Birchbark. I'm going to come see you and buy some pre-made ribs.
You can do that. You just tell me the width and the length you need.
I'm all over that. I'm all over that. That would take 100 hours off my job, at least.
It's all divided up into wood spacers.
So you would just take your ribs and slide them in
Ribs in each space.
okay, back to back,
Yeah.
and they would.
And enough ribs can go in there to do a complete canoe with a few spares.
You know how I do mine, Ray? Once I get them shaped out with a crooked knife, I just pour boiling water on them. And I just start bending them over my knee. I don't have a mold or anything
Right.
for the shape I want.
Well, the
You're-
native builders, they used to bend them in bundles with a rawhide,
That's exactly how I do it.
pull them around and
Yeah.
tighten them up.
And then when they're all tied and they're all in a bundle, front to back,
Yeah.
two per spacing, and then they progressively get smaller and tie the bundle and let it cure.
And they knew exactly how many to make of each size.
Probably handier at it than I am.
Much so. I'd agree.
So Ray, this particular canoe, when the new metal was put onto the form, it's not done exactly right, is it? Like
No,
we
it
have a
is not.
gap here because of the curve.
Yeah. And the other thing is that the rib is 1 3/4 inches, and you have to align it so it aligns down the center.
So your tacks hopefully are going closest to center as
When
possible.
you tack through the plank,
It
it
has to
hits
hit that.
and clinches the nail.
Right.
It's
And you were mentioning too, Ray, about the rib and how you have the taper on the one side
yes,
to accommodate for that
curve back.
curve as you're progressing down the hall.
Yeah.
Interesting.
That works only on that form back there.
Right.
Yeah.
Got it.
It's amazing. Not many people would get it right, but that's one of the little tricks you have to know when you're building.
Tricks of the trade.
Yeah.
Tricks of the trade,
Tricks
Ray.
of the trade.
Well. So for how many years, Ray, you made paddles?
43.
Is that all?
That's enough.
43 years. So when did you quit making paddles?
2014.
So Cathy and I actually had a couple of raised paddles, and now they're collector's items.
Yes.
They bring big bucks on eBay and stuff. You may have
That's
to.
one of my designs, and that one is called a quill. It's designed strictly as a solo paddle. But with that paddle, it's designed in such a way that when you put it in the water, you paddle all day and never take it out of the water.
Indian stroke. World.
But
Yeah.
no, the trick is you control your canoe as you bring your paddle back.
Mm-hmm.
If it's breezy and you take it out of the water, you're forever trying to correct.
Adjusting the bow.
Yeah.
Yep. There's a Ray Kettlewell paddle,
Mhm.
and there's a Peter Kelly paddle. right there.
Well,
I built a lot of paddles, Ray, over the years out of walnut, out of cherry, out of ash, but mine don't quite look like that.
well, okay. Paddle making got to be very technical. And when I started into it, I was amazed at how little people knew about paddles. And yet they paddled. So I spent a lot of time in summer camps all over the province teaching them what a paddle was,
Yeah.
because they didn't know.
Yeah.
That one is going to end up as an exact copy of Omer's paddle.
Okay.
And I did 2 canoe trips in the Arctic.
Mm-hmm. So
And,
Cathy and I.
It was just an amazing experience. And people just cannot grasp what it's like to have nothing in front of you for 50 miles.
Days or weeks. We
Yeah.
did when we did the Mackenzie River. We went 16 days without seeing a human being.
Well, I did 2 10-day trips. Never saw a soul.
Yeah. Beautiful.
And the first trip we did, we followed the tree line. On the left, you had trees. On the right, you could see for 50 miles.
Barren ground. Yeah, man of my own heart. Man of my own heart. So I'm curious about the actual logo that we saw on your paddles. What's the history behind that?
Okay, there was a painting that I saw just south of Barrie, where they had that service for people to pull off the gas and restaurant and so on. Was a stylized Canada goose, and wings up, braking for a landing,
Okay.
and that turned into my logo.
Your logo, yeah. And a famous one it's become, sir.
And it's still my logo. It goes on all my canoes.
Yeah, good for you. So you sold the paddle making business when you were how old?
80.
And what did you tell me
I
earlier?
sold it in May and turned 80 in July.
And you told me earlier that you 1 year you made how many dollars selling paddles?
Well, the biggest year I had was 84,000.
$84,000. Glad the year was over.
Yeah, I was lucky to get out the end of it.
Like I think Cathy mentioned, it doesn't give you a lot of time to paddle the canoe, though, does it?
No, it does not.
No. What I find admirable about you, Ray, and our visit here today is that you're you have the passion to pass it on to these young, shall we call apprentices here? Like you want to see it going forward. You don't want to see it
Yeah,
end.
okay, here's what I told Kim. She knows now about building a canoe. She can't call herself a canoe builder, and she makes one herself,
Start to finish.
entirely on her own.
Without you standing over her
I'm not
shoulder.
going to stand over her.
Exactly.
Are you ready for that?
Then she can
I have
call
still a lot
herself
to learn,
canoe
but
builder.
I am willing and wanting to.
There we go. How about you, Brad?
I'm ready for the challenge.
Yeah, you're up for it. So, anyway, Ray, it's been a pleasure. I can't thank you enough for sharing this experience, your shop. So I guess, guys, we're off to your place, and we're going to see
Yes.
your, shall I call it your fleet?
My fleet.
You know, some people would,
Well, if you want to come over to the house, I have a little collection of paddles over there. I'll show you.
love to see them. Okay, right then, the neighbors or anybody that's close enough to Brad and Kim here are thinking them certifiable right now. Now, some people would look at this and go, this is an obsession, but it's our passion, right?
It is definitely
Canoeing.
my passion.
We have a fleet of our own, not quite this big and maybe a little more diverse in materials, but
Yep.
everybody needs a fleet of canoes, right?
100%.
So we're going to start looking at a bit of history, and we're going to try to fill in some of those blanks that I talked about in the introduction about these canoes were certainly the heyday of the recreational canoe hobby in America, and Brad and Kim are keeping it alive. So let's start with that far one. Some people rescue dogs, but Kim rescues canoes. Tell us about the farthest one, Kim.
Well, this is literally my rescue canoe. She was from the Minden dump, and I pulled in one day, and I was like, I got to see this canoe. And they're like, no, you can't take anything from the dump. And I said, I need to make that boat come home with me because she deserves to be in the water. They told me they were going to cut it up into shelves or do other things with it. And I promised that I would bring her back to life and she would be able to paddle. And well, after a long haul and a lot of fixing and different attempts to fix her, she is my sunset seeker and she has paddled a lot.
There you go. Beautiful and a beautiful job. So maybe what we can do is we'll come across here. Brad, what's the next one? What do we have there?
So the next one is a Tremblay 15-footer. It was built in 1974. The Tremblays used Verolite, which is a PVC impregnated canvas on the outside. So it's extremely durable. It's a hard plastic shell almost that goes over it, and it's 1974 and it doesn't leak at all. There's no cracks or anything in it. The wood is showing its age, but the outside shell is in shape still.
A wee bit heavy on the
It's
portage.
heavy. That boat's about 80 pounds, so it stays close to the landings.
So have we given them all names? We call that one, what's the far one?
She's my sunset seeker because you know what? When I started paddling and that's where I went. I went to seek sunsets, and that's why she's yellow as well.
So we call this the take?
Yeah.
Is that where we go with that?
Okay.
Speaking of nicknames, let's go to the wee one over here.
Oh, this is Little Red.
See, I would have called it Peanut.
So
Shake.
I have obsession with little boats, just because I think they're just so cute. And a lot of times I'm paddling on Crown land, and I go down little creeks and little rivers and hopping over beaver dams and things like that. So I want something that's light and easy to maneuver, and this little girl kind of just does that. She's just too cute not to have. So Little Red is a chestnut. She's a featherweight, and I don't know what else to say other than she's stinking cute.
I bet it doesn't paddle in a straight, kind of does one of these.
She definitely does not paddle in a straight line. She is not made for big lakes or wide open water. This is definitely, it was made for trappers to be going through those narrow creeks and small waterways.
Solo hunters.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Prospectors.
So she's extremely maneuverable, and you can turn it around easy. She's super stable. You can stand up, kind of tilt her side to side, and she's great.
She's beautiful.
And she's beautiful.
Okay,
Yeah.
moving right along. So before we leave this one, any idea of the vintage?
Oh, I don't know the year on this one.
It's older though. I'm sure it would be 40s or 50s when that one was built.
I do believe it's definitely in the 40-50 range.
Well, that's even older than you two.
You
Oh,
bet.
yeah.
Put together. Put together. Okay, what do we have here?
So this is definitely a work boat that I need to recanvas. This is from the Sears company. I don't have a whole lot of history on her. I picked her up as a project for myself to continue to learn how to recanvas these boats and keep this alive.
May I just pull it back
Yeah,
here?
you
Because
bet.
the interesting part of this one that I saw was it actually has the Simpson Sears.
Yep.
Oops, your snow's deep. Here. It has the Simpson Sears label right there on the front.
Yes.
So we'd be talking 40s, 50s, right, guys?
40s, 50s. This was, these were made to go into kind of box stores, to be sold for recreational purposes.
It was becoming more affordable for people.
Way more affordable, easy to mass produce, not hand built kind of things. I mean, they're still hand built, but just more box store kind of style.
Yeah, exactly. Looking at the history, so we see the evolution of the canvas canoes. Birchbark's going out of favor. It's getting harder to find. There was a time period in the late 1800s, mid to late 1800s, when it was for the affluent only. They had lodges where they would go and paddle the boat, and I just find we've evolved from that. And we did some research where it indicated it was actually a courting tool, if you would.
Okay.
Where it was back in the day where people had to have chaperones. But two people could go out in the canoe, the chaperone could watch from shore. And they'd have little compartments in it where they could have beverages. And anyway, I find that pretty neat bit of the history. Okay, if I can get my leg out of your deep snow, we can move right along here.
All right.
So this again is an older canoe, right, that has been refurbished?
Yes.
Do we know the vintage of this one?
Again.
I believe Ray said it was from 1950s. This one was built, and it's a chestnut canoe. He had it recanvassed when he got it. I think the rest of it's all original though in this one.
Yeah, right. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Looks like he's replaced his thwart, right, with that little style one.
Yeah.
And Brad, you can explain what the purpose of that design of the thwart was?
The thwart was made for lashing your gear in. You'd tie it to these, so if you got into any rough waves or anything, your gear wouldn't slide around. It was held stable by that, so the ropes wouldn't slide on the thwart.
And prior to having yokes, they would lash paddles here too, right?
That's exactly.
Put the blade of the paddle here and the handles up here, and that rested on their shoulders.
On the shoulders, or they'd use tump lines as well.
Portaging.
Yep.
I can tell you guys you got snowmobiles in the backdrop and snowshoes, but you're itching for all this to go away. I'm thinking.
Well, you know what? I paddle all year round, so where there's open water, I still paddle.
I know. I've seen some of the pictures.
Exactly.
Ice
So
built up on the sides.
that's right.
Like I said, certifiable. Okay, moving right along.
Okay.
So now we've got three. You call them Ray K canoes?
They're my Ray K canoes. Yes.
Ray Kettlewell, a wealth of knowledge and a tremendous, likable fellow that's sharing all these old skills. So maybe we could start, Brad, with the first one. So what are we looking
So the
at?
red one is my boat. The red one and the blue one, Kim and I got to his shop, and they were already, the wooden parts were finished. We put the Seconite covers on the outside. Seconite is much lighter than canvas.
It's the
stuff
material they use on airplane wings.
on airplane wings and that. So it takes a lot less filler and stuff to make them smooth and that and watertight. So anyway, we finished those ones, painted them up. This one's all done in cherry. The gunnels are cherry, the seats are cherry, and the inside is all cedar, of course. And same with this one. This is all cherry as well. So we worked on those two boats, and then we did this one right from start to finish. We built all the, cut all the planks, all the ribs. We built the whole thing, even the seats we put together and that for it.
Yeah.
There's a wee bit of pride on your faces here.
Oh, this was my bucket list.
Really, girl?
You bet you.
I thought you said it was Birchbark.
Well, that's where the passion started. But you know what? My biggest goal was building my own canoe. And Ray kind of took me under his wing and welcomed me into his shop and made what I thought was an impossible dream come true, to be honest with you. And I got to touch and create and make every single piece of this canoe, you know, and although Ray doesn't always agree with my yellow color, again, my biggest thing is sunset seeking, and that's where I kind of find my awe. So yellow she is, and she's just a beautiful, beautiful boat. I love her.
Maybe Cathy and I can paddle this in the spring.
100%.
All right. I got to get me a couple more of those Ray paddles.
Yes, absolutely.
We talked about his design, and I'm really liking that. I'm going to maybe go back and make
Once
one.
you paddle with one of Ray's paddles, you will never go back.
Here we go. And we have one final canoe over here.
We
behind
sure do.
Cathy. All right, let's have a look at it. You know, they say you guys got a lot of snow up here, right? Right? You got 2 or 3 feet, close to 3 feet on the level, a good foot more than we have. But that old saying that you can either find joy in snow or you can find no joy in snow, but you're going to have the same amount of snow.
That's exactly it.
Anyway, I really thank you guys for pulling these out. But one last canoe here. And you were saying that somehow this has some ties to the Canadian iconic Gordon Lightfoot.
So it does, and I'd have to get all of the for sure information on that. But when I went and purchased this boat, just before we were kind of done loading her up or whatever, they had informed me that this boat actually belonged to Peter Lightfoot, which is a connection to Gordon. I don't know if it's his cousin, uncle, I'm not really sure. But yeah, there is some connection to it. And it's just been added to my fleet. And
Fleet.
yeah.
Oh, that's great. That's great. I look forward, guys, getting up here and actually making some wake in the water, shall we?
You bet.
Maybe a camping trip.
We can each take our own boat.
There we go. What do you think?
Well, my saying is, what is it? Love many, trust few, but learn to paddle or build your own canoe.
There you go.
That's it.
And anyway, Kim, it's been a pleasure.
No problem.
I'm going to
Anytime.
help you put these away, though.
Sounds good.
Brad, always. Thank you.